Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund.
Hi, I'm Jim Ghostley, and I'm here today to talk to you about the Lake Julia Sanatorium out in the north end of Lake Julia, 15 miles north of Bemidji. The sanatorium was used for many years to treat tuberculosis and tuberculosis patients. And the main reason I'm here is because my connection to the sanatorium was the fact that my mother was the director of the sanatorium. She was superintendent for 30 years, from 1929 until 1953, and was in charge of not only treatment of the patients, but the care of all the properties, the dairy and the farming connected with that, and also the daily diet for the patients, and in charge of the nursing staff and all employees. Big job. My mother's name was Dr. Mary Ghostley, and she came here from International Falls to operate the sanatorium because there were no physicians at that time that would take that job. It paid $100 a month, and it wasn't considered adequate for most physicians' monthly income. And she took it because she felt that the job had to be done. Her medical training was at the University of Minnesota, and she graduated in 1909 and was an early physician in the state of Minnesota for a female, but not the first female by any means. The males in the profession did not like females being in the profession with them. So she had some difficulties, but in International Falls, where she had moved to Lake Julia from, she had a schoolmate who was married to a physician there, both of them being physicians. And she would meet with Dr. Elizabeth Monahan, and the two of them would kind of buoy each other up, and it was something to bounce things off of. There were no support groups in those days. Tuberculosis is a hard thing to detect. There was a test called a Mantoux test that was given to people to determine whether they had a tubercular bacilli active in their systems or not. And it was given with just a little injection under the first layer of skin in the arm, and people would get a red ring around that injection in 3 days, and the doctor gave the injection would come back and read it in 3 days and see how it was. So the main force of that was applied to the schools within the county, and my mother used to travel around to the county schools, all the little country schools, and there were many, many of them. They've been consolidated today, so people don't realize the number of small country schools that were here in those days. But she went to all the schools and gave the little kids tests, and there are many people today that remember very well when she came into their classrooms and gave Mantoux tests. But that's how it was discovered. And the main thing about tuberculosis was, of course, it affected the lung. But it did also affect other organs in the body, and it could also more or less dry up and encapsulate, and it would form a little shell, just like a clam or an oyster holds a pearl. It would have a little shell around it, and that'd be encapsulated, and it could stay inactive inside that little capsule for a lifetime, or reactivate later in life and re-affect the person. Well, the sanatorium was constructed primarily for the purpose of treating tuberculosis patients, and it was, I think the construction was begun around 1915. And they had huge windows and let in lots of sunlight for the purpose of treating patients. What they figured fresh air and sunlight was the best treatment at that time. And they had scattered sanatoriums around the state of Minnesota, and Lake Julia was one. It handled 52 patients at maximum capacity. There was a staff of nurses. There was a little x-ray room, and one of the nurses was trained as an x-ray technician. And she was there, Thora Bakken was her name. She was there for many, many years. I'm sure she was there well over 30 years and made her lifetime career right there as a nurse and x-ray technician at that sanatorium. But there was a period of time where an antibiotic was developed that would take care of the tuberculosis. And they also developed a medication. When given to the tuberculosis patient, it would cause the tubercular bacilli to become hungry, just develop a ravenous appetite in the bacilli. And then they'd give them the antibiotic when they were hungry, and it managed to more or less eradicate tuberculosis for many years. But with the introduction of people from third world countries where sanitation is not well practiced, it's developed new tubercular bacilli that have been brought into the country. So tuberculosis is back again. The disease was so prevalent that it was all over the country. And people were careless. They didn't know sanitation practices well, and there used to be signs on walls that say, "Do not spit," do not spit on the sidewalk, no spitting allowed. And people would spread the disease unknowingly, and before they knew they had it, So they were very careful about educating the public in different ways to hold the transportation of the bacteria down. Well, sanatorium's purposes were not only to house the patient and give them a place to recuperate, but it was also a place to keep the patient away from the public. And it allowed the patients to be idle and inactive, because extreme activity just made the patient much worse. It would activate the tubercular bacilli, and patients wouldn't recover so well. So they wanted to keep them isolated from the public and quiet. And this is the main level of the sanatorium, as I recall, was male patients, and the upper level was the female patients. And there were bathrooms on the other side of the building. This side faced the lake. It was a beautiful view and a very nice location for the patients to be. And they could enjoy the outside view of birds and animals sometimes, and activity on the lake. Well, now this is a model of the sanatorium building that was made at Bemidji State University. And it's a very good model. It shows a road going around the sanatorium, which was there for the early days, but it disappeared. In the early 30s, there was, for instance, where I am standing, there was a old farm, barn and whatnot down on the lakeshore, and it burned down. So the road that went around just had no more need to be there, and it became lawn. And you could still drive on the lawn and up to the front steps when absolutely necessary, but it wasn't encouraged because it rutted the lawn. But there was a sidewalk went around, and this is the front side that faced the lake. And it was a very handsome building. It's all masonry. It still stands. The building has the stucco on the outside is deteriorating today, but the same with the plaster inside. The whole thing is concrete block and brick structurally. A very heavy building. It had curved tile like you'd see in Mexico for the building, clay tile roof, and that was stripped off of it, but everything out there was masonry, and it still stands. The dramatic structure for the powerful building that they made in those days, and I don't have any idea how deep the footings are. They probably go way down in the ground to hold that structure. But this was the front of it, and this back side had the kitchen, and the delivery from the dairy was made to the kitchen door on the back side. And there was a large walk-in refrigerator where they had the meat and all the supplies and things that had to be cooled. It was early type refrigeration, but you could walk right in. It had great big thick, probably a 10-inch thick door just going in and out of the refrigerator, so the people in the kitchen could walk in and out and get things. But it was a good old building. At the upstairs on this back side, there was an X-ray room. The back porch upstairs was female patients totally, and this was all female patients upstairs here. The men were down below, and they were all in this front side. The basement rooms were used for employee bedrooms for the male employees. They were in use also. And there was an engine room down underneath for boilers and a laundry. There was a big laundry downstairs, did all the sheets and work for the hospital. So it was really a well thought out building, and there were many of them. And all of the buildings were just about duplicates of one and another around the state. It's kind of interesting to think about what the patients would feel like when they were asked to go see if they had tuberculosis, find out they did, and then were sent to the sanatorium. There wouldn't be much hope left for a person. You'd kind of have a caved-in feeling when you had to be sent to a place like the sanatorium and isolated from your friends and community. I had a friend that was a patient out there from the time he was probably a sophomore in high school. And he was a patient, as I recall, for right around a 10-year period. And he managed to get better, and he was cured. He had only one lung, but he was cured, and he got himself a college degree. He worked successfully in International Falls at the paper mill as a chemist up there, and did well. He passed away just a year or so ago, and he was in his 80s, and so he had a good life, and I think he was always proud that he survived that disease. There was a lot of times that my mother would be very busy trying to teach patients something they could do with their spare time. And today there's definitely a part of medicine is occupational therapy, and I'm sure most people know an occupational therapist, and they're loaded with ideas. My mother just had to come up and kind of incorporate things that she understood and she knew, and she taught some of the patients how to knit. She taught some of them how to do tatting. This is an interesting photo. Pictures taken from the upper floor of the sanatorium called the North Porch, looking north out over the property. My sister and I did grow up out there, and we did think life was pretty good. We were far enough away from the sanatorium building, the hospital building, that we were pretty free to play in the yard, and any noises we made would probably not be heard over at the hospital building. It was taken before 1934 because this old garage building was there up until that time, and it was removed for a new building that housed a number of vehicles and office space and a reception room for visitors up above. The old sidewalks, I think, are still out there. This is the physician's residence, a nice log cabin. The greenhouse was always right there, and it was heated with steam heat from the boiler rooms in the sanatorium basement. And this formal garden, my mother would come from the sanatorium, and she'd always get caught along the sidewalk picking weeds out to make the flowers grow better. She couldn't pass up weeds without removing them. And the greenhouse, she used that. She developed a number of little plants that she would grow and takes, slips off of and start again, make different plants with them. Well, my mother was very busy all the time and at the sanatorium, and when I graduated from high school, I went into the Navy, and the Navy, of course, tested everybody, and I was placed in the Navy Hospital Corps, and we took care of a lot of the military personnel, all phases of Army and Navy, Marines, Air Force, whatever, that were wounded in World War II. And I was trained then as a hospital corpsman, and when the Korean War broke out, I went to Korea, and I was over there for a period of time, and coming home from Incheon, I was placed on board a converted troop transport that was made into a hospital ship, basically to bring wounded back to their home countries after the Korean War was over. And I managed to get an around-the-world cruise with Uncle Sam, which was very good. And when I came home, I started college and wound up teaching school for a while in a degree in biology and art, and I also was a swimming coach, but I didn't care for teaching, so I packed everything up and took my family and went to the University of Minnesota Dental School. And I graduated as a doctor of dental surgery in 1963. Came up to Bemidji to practice. When we were small, I remember being in the house many times when the nighttime engineer, there was a 24-hour-a-day engineer on duty at the Sanatorium boiler building, and that produced electricity for the sanatorium, and it produced heat and drove the water system. Everything was powered right out of the sanatorium basement engineering room. And when I was small, I can remember many times the engineer that was on night duty would come over and pound on the wall to wake Mom up to come over, because one night nurse said they needed her right away, and that happened frequently. She would go over and take care of whatever it was, and we didn't always know. We didn't ask questions, but we didn't talk about things either when we did hear. So my sister and I were both pretty quiet about what we happened to overhear, and she didn't ever have much free time. When she was done with her day's work at the sanatorium, she would come over to the house and see both of us, my sister and I, for a while, and then she'd go to the office and read x-rays into the night and make reports to physicians all around the state that sent in x-rays, great big chest x-rays of their patients, and want to know more about what the x-ray showed. And she would diagnose from the x-ray and write a full report. And this was before radiologists were being produced by the schools. And one of the early radiologists that I met one time told me that her reports were used as a format for the reports that they were taught to make in school. So he knew my name when he met me. He knew my name just from those reports that he'd used as a student. So she was pretty busy all the time.
If you enjoyed this segment of Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground, consider making a contribution at lptv.org. If you have segment ideas pertaining to North Central Minnesota, contact us at legacy@lptv.org. Common Ground is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund by the vote of the people on November 4th, 2008.